Hi, I'm Mike Robbins, and I'm a speaker and author of 4 books, including my latest, Bring Your Whole Self to Work. Today on the show, we talk about grief, we talk about authenticity, and we talk about growth mindset. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this particular episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron. I'm the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? When you go to work, do you sometimes feel like there are parts of you that you have to leave at home? Well, what if you could bring your whole self to work? Remember, you can now chat about this episode or any past episodes inside both our Facebook and LinkedIn groups by simply looking for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. And as always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you tune into podcasts. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please go over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, where we go out all the way from Georgia to Colorado and up back over again to Washington, D.C. You can also catch us on Roku TV, where there's over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. And I don't know if you know this, but you can actually just hit Google Play or Google Home or Alexa and say, play Dov Baron podcast, and you'll get us there too. So again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you are a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, or a leader in any capacity, you know that there's a word out there that you might think is a bit overused. That word, it comes up all the time in leadership. What's that word? Authenticity. On this episode, we're going to examine what authenticity really means in the context of being a leader. And we're also going to examine another throwaway phrase, which is growth mindset, and why so many leaders think they have one, but they don't. Stay tuned, because you're about to find out from our guest today. Our guest has been featured in Forbes, Fast Company, the Wall Street Journal. He's been a regular contributor to the Huffington Post for the past decade, and his books have been translated into 15 different languages. Mike Robbins is the author of 4 books, Focus on the Good Stuff, Be Yourself, Everyone Else is Taken, Nothing Changes Until You Do, and his brand new book, Bring Your Whole Self to Work. This guy started out as a pro athlete, and today he is a sought-after thought leader who delivers keynotes and seminars for the top organizations in the world. Mike's clients include Google, Wells Fargo, Microsoft, Citibank, Gap, Schwab, Twitter, Deloitte, eBay, and many others. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and help me welcome Mike Robbins!
Hey, Dov, how are you?
Good, mate. It's good to have you here. It's good to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
And you're joining us all the way from?
I live right outside of San Francisco in California.
In California, yes. Okay, well, you know, the way we like to start the show is I like to ask my guests the same question, and it never ceases to amaze me. So what we want to know is, who is someone that we likely wouldn't know, or maybe even wouldn't suspect, who has been a major influence on your life? Doesn't have to be somebody famous. It might be somebody we've never even heard of.
Oh, well, that's interesting. You know, I just had a chance to talk to him earlier today and interview him myself. Is a man named Dean Stotts, who was my pitching coach in college at Stanford University. So I grew up playing baseball and actually got drafted out of high school by the New York Yankees. Didn't end up signing with the Yankees because I got a chance to play baseball in college at Stanford, and I went to Stanford. And Dean was my pitching coach. And in addition to, he taught me a lot about baseball. Obviously, he was a great coach. I learned a lot, but more than baseball, and we're still good friends to this day. He was newly married at the time, married a woman who had 3 kids, so he became a stepfather. And then they had 2 of their own. So they ended up having 5 kids, and both of his 2 biological kids were born while I was in college. And I didn't realize this until many years later, and now appreciate it. So I learned so much about fatherhood and about family from him, because my parents split up when I was 3 and my dad wasn't around, and I was raised by a single mom. So Dean taught me a lot about the importance of family and what a strong, healthy father actually looks like. And so much more than baseball, he taught me a lot about life.
Tell us one of the things he taught you about being a dad. That's interesting.
He said, he talked a lot about 2 things. One, this wasn't so much specifically about being a dad, but one of his favorite mantras was, the quality of your life is based on the quality of your relationships. He would say that to us all the time. And I didn't totally understand it as an 18, 19, 20-year-old college baseball player, but I completely understand it now. But in terms of being a father, one of the things that he talked about was, because he was a new stepdad and then, a new dad. And he would actually talk to us about the fact that even though he was really smart, he was really confident, he didn't really know what he was doing. So some element of being able to admit, I don't know, there's no rule book for this. He would say, man, I'm just figuring this out as I go. And he said, as his kids got older, he would often say things to them like, look, I'm going to say no to this. I may be wrong, but here's why I'm saying no. And he would explain it to his children. And he talked to us about the importance of being able to be honest and be straightforward. Even if you don't know if the decision that you're making is the right decision, just tell the people around you, in this case, your children, why you're making the decision. I mean, I guess assuming it's age appropriate, but I learned a lot from him and him sharing those lessons.
But what fantastic leadership, right? I mean, not just parenting, but leadership. And I have often said that I believe that, I've written about how leadership is parenting and parenting is leadership. They're the same things. And, and that willingness to say, this is my decision. It might be wrong, but here's how I've come to it, right. Which also says, I'm open to say to you telling me, listen, you're off your rocker here. You've lost the plot, and here's what it might really be. And it's like, wow, that is so cool. Yeah. What a great way to start. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned there that, he was your coach, because this is your second career. As I mentioned, you were a pro athlete. You mentioned that, by the way, just to be clear, I know absolutely nothing about baseball whatsoever.
That's
but
okay.
I, who is completely daft about the sport, knows nothing about it. I know that being drafted by the New York Yankees out of high school, that's good stuff.
That's pretty big deal.
That shows you probably got a couple of skills.
Yeah.
But you turned them down to play baseball at Stanford University.
Yeah.
Right. So explain that kind of lunacy to us. For the people who are baseball fans, like, right? Is this guy on crack?
Well, so the way baseball works, pro baseball, there's a draft every year in June, and all the teams can draft either high school players, like I got drafted by the Yankees out of high school, or college players. I ended up getting drafted out of Stanford by the Kansas City Royals, another pro baseball team here in the U.S. Not quite as well known, of course, as the Yankees, but part of why I turned the Yankees down out of high school is, even if you get drafted and sign a contract with a major league team, you have to go into the minor leagues. And for kids that get drafted as high school players, you're going to spend 4 or 5 years in the minor leagues before you make it to the major leagues anyway. And the baseball at Stanford was at a high level. It also is such a great university that, if baseball didn't end up working out, I ended up getting injured when I was in the minor leagues with Kansas City as a pitcher, which is not that uncommon. I was able to get my education at Stanford and play baseball at a pretty high level, and then still get drafted again. So it was a calculated risk and something that we thought about and I talked about with my mom and my family a lot. But most of the guys that I played at Stanford with had been drafted in high school and chose not to sign because they wanted to come and play at a place like Stanford, which again is a great place to go to school and play baseball.
But my point here is not that, because you were what, 19?
I was 18 when I got drafted.
So you're 18. So that's my point, is you're 18.
Yeah.
And you know, it's more so than it's ever been today. But even back when you were 18,
yes,
that pull of the glamour, that
right.
pull of the da-da, you know, the
right.
bragging rights. I mean, you know, you go in the bar, hey, I just got drafted by, you know,
right.
That has some pull. It
yes.
has some pull with potential sexual partners and potential drinking partners.
Right.
It has pull, right?
Of course.
So I'm really interested because, you know, you talked about having no dad.
Yep.
Right. You talked about having a single mom as a parent. You talked about having a great coach in high school. So I'm really interested and fascinated by the fact that you were not seduced by that glamour, you know, that you chose, Stanford, that's a very civilized choice.
Yes.
Right. So most people wouldn't do that.
I mean, you're right. I also, in addition to my mother and some of the coaches and people around me in high school, you know, as I got into my junior and senior year in high school, I was playing with and against and in a community where there were other guys who had gone off and signed contracts and gone into the minor leagues, and some who'd gone off and played in college. And so from what I'd learned and heard from a lot of these people, not just some of my teammates, but also people that I trusted, they had some wisdom and experience about here are some of the pros and cons of doing either thing. So, you know, it wasn't a simple decision, but when I laid it all out and really looked at it, what were my goals in terms of baseball, but also in terms of life, going to Stanford actually did have some appeal. It wasn't quite as sexy as signing with the Yankees, but in either case, I sort of felt like, how blessed am I to have these two options? Sure. And the truth of the matter is, again, the glamour, I mean, you know, minor league baseball, if anybody watching or listening to us, even if you're not a baseball fan, there's a movie, it's about 30 years old now, but it's called Bull Durham. And Kevin Costner is the main character and Susan Sarandon plays his love interest, but it's all about the minor leagues. And you see really quickly, whether you see that movie or you've read anything or heard anything, the minor league baseball is not all that glamorous.
Right.
So, you know, you got a ways to go even once you get drafted by a major league team in order to get there. But
you went to Stanford. So what did you end up studying?
You know, I ended up getting my degree in something what's called American Studies, which is basically a combination of political science and history and a few other things. It was kind of an interdisciplinary major. I didn't go with any particular interest in studying. It was actually my sophomore year. At the end of my sophomore year, you had to declare a major. So I sat down with a counselor and they said, well, you're already halfway done with this American Studies major. And I said, what's that? And they were like, well, here's what it is. And I liked it because it allowed me to take a lot of different classes of things that I was interested in.
Right.
I also got a specialization in race and ethnicity because even though I'm straight and I'm white, and I grew up in the town of Oakland, California, which was incredibly racially diverse. And my senior year in high school was, you know, the Rodney King verdict and riots down in LA. And so there were a lot of things happening culturally and socially that I was interested in. So I took a lot of classes on ethnic studies and learning about different groups, which I now find to be incredibly useful and relevant.
Valuable. Very valuable now. Yeah, right. Absolutely. So, so you did go and you did play. You played, as you said, for the Kansas City something or other.
Royals, yeah.
You played for the Kansas City Royals.
I did. Well, I signed with the Royals as a junior at Stanford. Then I go into the minor leagues with the Royals. Played. There's like 6 different levels of the minor leagues. You have to work your way up. I got about halfway up, and then I injured my arm.
So you've gone. I mean, you played baseball in high school. Obviously, it's a dream. It's a passion.
Yes.
You get drafted by the New York Yankees, which is like wow.
Right.
But you turn that down to go to Stanford to play college.
Yep.
You go there, you get drafted again, and now
Yep.
you're playing with the Kansas City Royals.
Yep.
I mean, you've got to have a lot invested in that dream.
Oh, very much. I mean, I started at 7.
Right.
You know, signed my contract at age 21 after 3 years at Stanford after pitching in the College World Series. Then I'm in the minor leagues with the Royals for a few years, doing well, working my way up to get to the major league. So yeah, my whole life, my whole world, my whole identity is I'm Mike, the baseball player, you know, born single mom, not a lot of money. I'm going to make it to the major leagues. I'm going to make money. I'm going to be important and special and famous and, you know, all of the stuff that goes along with that. So my whole world was tied up into that.
And that's what I wanted to say. So, you know, you and I discussed this when I was on your show.
Yes.
This whole thing around identity. So you've
Yes.
got this massive amount of investment in the identity of Mike, the baseball player, Mike, who was drafted not only for the New York Yankees, but then, later on
Right.
again, chose to turn that down. I mean, there's a lot of
Yes.
investment there.
Yes.
And then you get injured and did it become evident right away that you were done?
The injury was pretty significant. So I tore ligaments in my elbow and I had reconstructive elbow surgery, which anyone who's a baseball fan now, it's referred to as Tommy John surgery, named after the guy that they originally did the surgery on. You can come back from it. And in those days, I mean, I got injured in 1997. It's even more successful now, but it was pretty significant. And it turns out that I'd actually pitched for 5 years with a partially torn ligament in my elbow,
Right.
which then created other problems. So I knew it was going to be a long road back, and it wasn't a guarantee that I would be able to make it back to where I needed to be to continue to compete at that level. And ultimately, I ended up actually having 3 surgeries, and I wasn't able to come back over a 2-year period.
So again, do you remember, and you may not remember, but do you remember confronting that identity issue, confronting that dream? I always talk about dreams as bubbles.
Yeah.
Right. And some bubbles you feed and you build them, you make them stronger.
Yeah.
But sometimes something comes along and just bursts that bubble, and then it rains a hurricane of grief.
Yeah. It was a ton of, I mean, it was incredibly painful. It was really sad. And it was scary because I was like, if I'm not this, then who am I?
Exactly.
This was the thing that I thought made me special. This was the thing that was going to change my life and change my story. A weird thing though, Dav, is even as you're asking the question, one of the blessings in the process happened a few years earlier in kind of a strange way. I actually got suicidally depressed when I was a junior in college, unrelated to baseball. Baseball was going well. School was going well. And I come from a family where my father had bipolar disorder and there's a lot of mental illness. So I wasn't unfamiliar with what this was, at least in theory, but experiencing depression at a really deep and painful way scared me because of the pain of it. But also it's like, oh no, am I going to turn out to be like my father? Right. Which I think many of us fear for lots of reasons, not just in my case. It was the mental illness that sort of took my father's life down and didn't allow him to fulfill his potential or be the kind of husband and father he wanted to be, or we needed him to be. But that process, as painful as it was, I got some help. Thankfully, I came through the other side of that. And it did give me a sense of confidence and resilience in that, look, when I was super depressed, as important as baseball was, that's how one of the reasons I knew I was so depressed is I didn't even care about baseball at that time. Like I just didn't even want to be here. And so a couple of years later, when I injured my arm, as awful as that was, and as much as it rocked my world and it threw me into another depression, not quite as significant, but there was a part of me that I did realize I needed to dig down deep and go, wait a minute, I'm going to need to figure out who I am, irrespective of whether I make it to the major leagues or not, because this me that I can't seem to get away from is going to be with me the whole time. So that was kind of the opening at that point in my life that had me realize I want to be successful in my life. I thought and was hoping I was going to be really successful as an athlete. I'm going to have to pick a new path, but it's not about the path because it's really about going inside. And I was really young, I was in my early 20s. But it was a major, life altering and sort of opening experience for me that I'm super grateful for, especially now looking back, because it brought me to my knees and forced me to deal with myself.
But as I said, I have said this before to people that when you have all of your chips on black, when you're fully invested in something and it goes away,
yes,
there is grief.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that, that somebody's dog dies. They go, oh yeah, what are you crying about? It was a dog. Well, people will get very bonded with a dog or with a cat, or or there's a dream, a career, and you lose that. It's equally and oftentimes even more devastating.
Yeah.
You had that, you had your depression, you had the baseball thing, and you had a lot of family loss.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the loss for me, I mean, I've experienced quite a bit of grief over the course of my life, as I'm sure many people listening and watching. What's interesting, I mean, right after I got hurt and I was going through all of that, the woman that I'd been dating since college, we'd been together for almost 4 years, left me abruptly. So I'm now dealing with, my life has changed. This relationship ends and I'm heartbroken based on that. A few years later, as I do kind of move through that experience, my father passed away when I was 27. And since that time, I mean, I'm 45, almost 46 years old now. My mom passed away when I was 37. My sister died just a few years ago. And in experiencing all of those different aspects of pretty intense grief, even back to when baseball ended, and you're right, we think of grief sometimes, someone dies, a parent, a friend, a spouse, but grief happens all the time. We're losing things, especially things that matter to us. It's not just the dog that dies, it's the dream that ends, or even
Absolutely.
just as we age, right? It's like you realize, I think of this as a parent. Parenthood is filled to me with celebration and grief all the time, because I realize, like, my girls are now 13 and 11, but it's like, I'll see a father with a 4-year-old daughter and I'll look at that and I have this sense of grief and sadness. Like, my girls are never going to be 4 years old. I can't throw them up on my shoulders anymore. It's not a bad thing, but it's just like, that I ever really confront that sadness or that loss. And so for me, with all of the losses in my life, they've been incredibly painful and hard. And at the same time, I also feel like, again, I don't mean to sugarcoat them in any way, because they haven't been easy, but I've learned so much about myself. And again, as I was saying earlier, been forced to my knees to have to really confront, like, who am I without my nuclear family? Who am I without this identity of a baseball player? Who am I without whatever it is, fill in the blank, that I thought made me who I am or made me safe? And the truth of the matter is, we're all dealing with that all the time. We just don't like to think about it and talk about it because it's painful or it's scary or we don't know what to do or say.
And I fully agree with you. That's why I said, the loss of the dream is a grief. The loss of a loved one is grief. And there's certain social validations of, well, your mom died. I understand your grief, or or your partner left you, and I understand your grief for a time.
Right.
You got a time limit on that, and then and you're done. Right.
Right.
And one of my quotes is that grief is an ocean with unpredictable tides.
Totally.
And I think that this is one of the things that people just don't understand, is that you can be in full-blown grief on Monday at noon and fully out of grief on Monday at 2 and fully back in at 2:30.
Yeah.
And the form it looks like, it could be anger, it could be weeping, could be devastation. It could be a million different ways in which it looks, because it's unpredictable in how it looks, as well as the tides of when it washes over you.
Completely.
So it's really important.
It is. And someone said to me when my sister died, and they said it to me probably 6 months after she passed away, and I don't know this to actually honestly be true. I should probably look it up, but they said that the Sanskrit translation of grief is guru. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was teacher, like that there's so much to learn in grief. And I thought, look, we have to be careful to give people advice when they're going through grief of any kind, because especially when it's really raw and it's painful, and but at the same time, I think hearing that, for me at least at that time, really resonated, because I thought, wow, I was learning so much through that experience. I've learned so much through my previous experiences of grief. And I also think it's important. I was talking to a friend the other day who lost his father when he was a teenager, and he just had a really big, exciting life moment, milestone in his life. And he said to me something that I thought was so true. He said, Mike, whenever something wonderful happens in my life these days, I simultaneously feel really happy and excited and grateful, of course, as mostly we do, but there's usually a little sadness or a little bittersweetness in it, because my dad's not here. And I think, I can't share this with him, or he doesn't, And I thought that's a really interesting thing to think about for any of us. If we lose people or other things like that are meaningful to us, things happen in life that are wonderful and exciting. And there may be an element of the missing of someone else, or not being able to share it with someone else. And again, that's very normal and natural and human. And it's like, we live sometimes in this binary world of like, it has to be all one thing or all something else, when like most things, emotionally, mentally, and otherwise, even practically, are a combination of things.
Yeah, and this is where I want to go with you here, because I think this is part of the illusion of authenticity.
Yes.
Because I think that, you and I talked a lot about this when I was on your show, is that the idea of authenticity is absolute horseshit for most people, because it's a single face. and
Right.
it's not that.
Right.
Because authenticity is all of those things at any given moment, so as I always say, when I think you asked me about it, when I fell, and people, if somebody had said to me, this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you, I'd have punched him in the nose. There's no doubt about it. It would have been a stupid thing to say. Is it the best thing that ever happened to me up until that point? Yes. But at the point, it's not.
No.
Like, so saying, listen, your mom died, it's going to be really great for you. Okay, well, just open your legs a little bit, because I got to pull my leg back so I can boot you, right? I mean, it's just like, and I think that this is part of the trap, is that we think it's got to be certain things and only certain things. And as I believe that the celebration of life and the grief of life is, as you said, it's this mix. For me, I've described it often as it's a curry. I love curries, right? But it's a curry because my wife makes these amazing curries, and there's 10,000 spices in there, and it's not measured. It's very much a feel it and taste it and experience it, and then there's this amazing experience.
Yes.
But in that curry, I know she's put stuff in there I don't like.
Right.
Yeah. When the final thing is done,
Yep.
it's spectacular.
Right.
I hate mustard. It's disgusting. There's always mustard seed in there.
Right.
And it's part of this delicious flavor.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great understanding of grief and of celebration.
Yeah.
That, if you give me the mustard on its own, disgusting, bad. You give me the curry, fantastic.
Right.
Right. So which is it? Well, it's actually both, right? And I love that about, what you were saying there. So let's go to this, because as we talked about, this is your second career.
Mm-hmm.
You've gone through all these things. You've gone through the grief. You've lost the dream. We've talked about the influences on your life and all those kinds of things. So now let's go over to, these companies who bring you in. We talked about, you've worked with some of the really big guys, whether that was Google or Wells Fargo or Citibank or, eBay or Deloitte or whoever it was.
Yep.
Talk to us about transitioning into that world, because it seems very different.
It is. Well, yeah. I mean, so when I first got done, I moved back home. It was the late 90s. I actually got a job working in the tech world. So I got a sales job working for an internet company here in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I still live. And what I found, one of the things that I had been most fascinated by when I was playing was I was fascinated by team dynamics. So like I was on some teams sometimes where we had really good talent, but the team wasn't very good, which was super frustrating, because like in sports, if you have the best athletes, you should have the best team, right? That's not always the case.
No.
Because I was on some other teams where, the talent was decent, not fantastic, but the team was incredible. We would like beat other teams that had better players than we did. I didn't totally understand this. None of us did, but we talked a little bit about it. We called it team chemistry.
Yep.
No one could quite define what that was, but you knew when you had it, and you definitely knew when you didn't have it. And it wasn't just some warm, fuzzy, touchy-feely thing. It like made us better, right?
Yep.
Or worse. And so when I get into the tech world, into the business world, and I've got the sales job, I figure, the business world will be way different than the sports world. And it was. But I immediately noticed, though, with all the difference and what we were doing different and the mentality, but that whole team chemistry thing that I erroneously thought was a sports thing, I was like, that's not a sports thing. That's a human thing. In business, we call it culture. It's similarly hard to define. It's kind of intangible, but you know when it's strong and you know when it's not. And so after I worked for two different tech companies during sort of the dot-com boom time of the late 90s into 2000. And then when the dot-com bubble burst, I lost my job like just about everybody else, especially people my age who were, right? But I had become so fascinated, almost obsessed with this whole team chemistry and culture thing. Also on an individual basis, I'd also noticed, just like in sports, it wasn't always the most talented people that were the most successful. And it wasn't always the most quote unquote successful people that were the happiest and the most fulfilled. So both on an individual level and on a group level, I was like, I want to study this and learn more about this. I want to figure out how to take my own talent, turn it into success. If I have any success, actually learn how to be fulfilled and happy, because no one ever really taught me how to do that. And on a team level, I want to figure out what are the key drivers that create, that chemistry, that culture. And if I can figure those things out, I'd love to share them with other people because I'm just sort of wired that way. And that's what actually had me start my consulting business almost 20 years ago, was just these curiosities and my own study of those things. And as I started to learn some things about that, I just wanted to turn around and share them with other people. So it got me speaking a bit and coaching a bit and writing a bit. And I was young and pretty naive and inexperienced. But what I found was that the message that I was sharing was resonating with people. And these companies, some of them based right here in the Bay Area, at that time, there were a bunch of people my age who were young, who had worked in the tech world, who had gotten laid off, who were then moving back into more traditional companies, the Wells Fargos and Chevrons and Kaisers of the world. The companies were bringing me in, can you help talk to our leaders about how do we all get along and work together? And so my background as an athlete and some of what I'd been learning, I started to go in and talk about these things. And then, it's evolved over the 20 years and I've written some books, but it's really just continued to build on that. And, I love what I do, like you do, right? We get to do this and share some wisdom and stories and ideas in a way that hopefully can benefit other people and make them better leaders and better people.
Mm-hmm. So now let's talk about, your new book, which is bringing your whole self to work.
Yes.
Talk to about that in the context of, like I said, this misguided idea of authenticity, of this limited idea of authenticity.
Right. Well, I think, one of the things that I've noticed about studying authenticity in particular over the last decade, right, is you're right. There's misunderstandings and misperceptions about what does it mean. And I think what I'd seen as I started to reflect back on, and I started to work on this most recent book, I was like, okay, so I've been doing this for the last couple decades. I've seen a lot of different leaders, a lot of different teams, a lot of different environments. As you and I both know, there's not one right way to create, a winning team or a strong culture. However, one of the through lines that I saw through the best leaders that I worked with, the best teams, was this sense that people had the freedom to be themselves and bring themselves, as simple and almost corny as that sounds. It's like authenticity isn't this like defined thing. It means I can show up and be me. You can show up and be you. We're probably going to piss each other off sometimes. We're probably going to disagree about some stuff. We're probably going to see things differently. That's great. If we have the freedom to bring that forward in a real and positive way, that can make our relationship individually, one-on-one, more effective. And if we're in a group and an environment where we can do that with each other, it's going to bring out the best in everybody. But if I'm afraid, I can't say this, I can't say that, I can't do this, I can't try this, and I might fail, or you might judge me or think I'm an idiot, it's just not going to work. So that's really what a lot of my work in the recent years has been about, empowering and inspiring leaders and teams to create environments where we can really bring all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly, in service of us actually building more trust and doing better work together.
But again, Mike, I see a potential challenge for the viewer listener because, I think things get misunderstood. So the misunderstanding becomes, so I've really just got to put up with somebody's bad behavior because that's them being authentic.
Right.
That is one of the conceptions.
Right.
So talk to us about that.
Well, look, people say, well, what if someone really is just a jerk? Is that okay to bring all of that? And it's like, well, look, we all have those parts of ourselves, but part of it is like being authentic doesn't also mean we got to put up with stuff. A big part of this conversation is creating healthy boundaries and being clear about that, right? It's like, hey, it's not about just letting people walk all over us and, well, I'm just going to let you be you and I'll just be me. And if you're super rude and offensive and say and do horrible things,
I'll just give you a couple of flowers and send you some love and light.
No, not at all. Look, I love the idea. A mentor of mine years ago, Dov, said this great thing to me that I never forgot. He said, Mike, what stands between you and the kind of relationships you really want to have with people? I said, what's that? He said, it's probably a 10-minute sweaty palm conversation you're too afraid to have. He said, if you get really good at those 10-minute sweaty palm conversations, you'll have fantastic relationships with people. You'll build trust. You'll resolve conflict. You'll get to know people who are different than you. You'll talk about the elephant in the room. You'll give feedback. You'll receive feedback. He's like, but if you do like most of us and you avoid them, then you end up sort of being a victim of who you live with, who you work with. So with respect to the question you just asked, authenticity is really about us being able to be real with each other. And sometimes that realness is like, hey, knock it off. Please don't do that, or don't say that, or that doesn't work for me, or I'm not interested in that, or that's not okay, or whatever the case may be. It's not simply just, we're just going to give everyone permission to do and say whatever they want. That's anarchy. That's crazy making. Do you know what I mean? No, look, I'm not also advocating that we all are so buttoned up that we all have to look the same and act the same and we can't ever say boo. But it's really, as we're talking about before with grief, it's all of it, right?
Yes.
I mean, so being authentic and being real and creating that kind of environment means, yes, we care about each other and value each other, and there is that sense of psychological safety, but at the same time, we're also willing to give each other feedback and let each other know what works, what doesn't work. And if someone is interacting with us in a way that's not working, not empowering us, upsetting us for whatever reason, do we have the confidence and the courage to actually speak up and say something about it and let them know? And if we don't, do we at least have someone else, a leader or someone else in the organization we can go to, not to run and tattle like we're little kids, but just say, hey, this isn't working for me and I don't know how to deal with it. Can you help me out? Because we got to address this.
Yeah. Again, this is part of the illusions of authenticity. So,
right.
Authenticity in some cases, all things in the mind have polarity. And so on one side of the polarity is this new age hocus pocus bull that says, things like, well, I've just got to love you and understand that you're doing the best you can. That's horse crap.
Right.
And on the other side of it, the polarity of that is, well, I'm an asshole and I know I'm an asshole. At least I'm authentic about it. No,
right.
You're an asshole.
Right.
It's different. So again, when we talk about having a healthy culture
yep.
that supports authenticity, we also need to remember what you said earlier is vitally important for us, which is stating healthy boundaries for our environment.
Yes.
Like, I don't care that you have sex. That's fantastic. I celebrate that. But most churches are not going to be pretty good with you doing that, even though they may condone you having sex and want you to go forth and multiply. They
right.
probably don't want you doing it in the pews during the service.
Right.
So they can support you in doing it, but they also have parameters around it. And I think that this is the thing that people don't understand, that authenticity also has to real, true authenticity have to have healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
The problem is that most leaders don't understand that.
Right.
So they're dictatorial and this is the rules, or they're the other side, which is, oh, we have no boundaries, do whatever you want. Oh, yeah, we're going to go bankrupt, but at least we loved everybody.
Right.
What are you doing? Are you on crack? What's going on here?
Right.
So that's a really important piece, right?
Absolutely. Well, and you're right. I mean, it is the ability to, as we've been talking about in different ways, of integrate and balance different aspects. One distinction I like to make too, when we're talking about authenticity, is the distinction between self-righteousness, which is I'm right, you're wrong, and
Absolutely.
Conviction, right? Self-righteousness is dangerous. It's damaging, because if I'm right about something and you don't agree with me, that makes you wrong. Now we're at odds. Now disagreeing isn't the problem. That's actually healthy. That's important. The issue is when I think I'm right, like with a capital R. Oftentimes, I won't even have the courage to speak up and say, hey, Dov, I think you're wrong, and we'll hash it out. I will just go, okay, thanks, wonderful, great. And then I leave and tell other people he's wrong, or he's an idiot, or that's stupid. And now we start creating disconnection and separation. Conviction, on the other hand, is I believe this to be true. I'm willing to speak up about it. I'm willing to be the only one in the room who says this, who may be the outlying opinion. But I have enough humility and enough self-awareness to realize a couple of things. First of all, I might be wrong. And second of all, if I can't even acknowledge maybe I'm wrong, can I at least acknowledge maybe there's another way to look at this thing? So then if we engage with each other from a place of conviction, we can have those sweaty palm conversations. We can challenge each other. We can disagree. We can bump up against each other respectfully. But it can be really healthy. If we operate from self-righteousness, then we start creating all this us versus them mentality all over. And that creates problems in teams and organizations. You and I see this all the time, right? In the work that we do, all the leaders who are watching or listening to us know what that's like when you've got people on your team or people in your organization. Well, whoever they are, that office or that department or that group, but and now all of a sudden we've created, business is hard enough. We're dealing with competition. We're dealing with market factors. We're dealing with the world moving 1,000,000 miles an hour these days. If we're competing negatively and fighting negatively amongst ourselves, those are unforced errors. Those are things we can control. We can control the culture and the climate internally. We can't always control how effective we're going to be in terms of our results or what the competition is going to do or how the economy is going to be. But that's the thing. That's something I learned as an athlete. Like, I could control my mindset and my perspective and the type of team player that I was. I couldn't always control the outcome of the game.
And that's about the end of it, really. Right?
Right.
Everything else is like, okay, that's what, and it's 100% ownership of that, while having full and absolutely willing to 100% let go of everything else. And
Totally.
what most people I find do, particularly, because I work with athletes too, people who are highly competitive, is they do the reverse.
Right.
They try to control everything external and they have no control internally.
Totally.
So they're like stressed out, freaked out, not working well, and have lost control internally completely. And as a result, are self-prescribing whatever it is that they need to do to feel better.
So true. Well, the other thing about competition, another distinction I like to make is really simple, but between positive and negative competition. Positive competition is when we compete with each other so that it brings out the best in each other. It's just like if you and I go work out, and let's say we're relatively at the same level of physical ability, and we go have a workout, you're going to push me, I'm going to push you. As long as we do that positively, we'll get a better workout. Negative competition is when we compete against each other and it's a win at all cost. It's a, I'm better than you. It's right. We literally will step on top of each other in an antagonizing kind of way that creates a really unhealthy environment. And that's, again, you and I working out with each other, and I'm trash talking and you're trash talking, or we go do something, and at the end of it, like, we don't even want to be friends anymore because it got so contentious. But that's why, like, leaders who can create an environment where they encourage positive competition, that brings out the best in everyone. That raises the bar for everyone. Leaders who do that thing, and you and I see it, where it's like we're pitting people against each other, or it's all about, external goals and validation that then become, hey, we're just going to, it's a dog eat dog kind of environment. That can work in the short term, but that's not sustainable. And that's not going to create a really strong culture where people care about each other and what we're doing and are really bought in.
Yeah. I mean, I find that those environments in that negative sense become cannibalistic.
Yeah.
I mean, people will eat their own. They will, and they're not people who don't feel safe to have healthy competition.
Right.
Let's go to the other side now, which is the other thing I mentioned at the beginning, which is another of the illusions, which is this growth mindset.
Yeah.
It's one of those terms that's thrown around. When Carolyn wrote the book on it, and people understood it. But I find that with a lot of these things, people understand the concept.
Yes.
And they get very good at the concept, and they'll talk about the concept, but they don't really know what it means at a subjective, personal level.
Right.
And this is, again, another part of your work. So talk to us a little bit about what it means to have that growth mindset versus the illusion of what it means.
Well, I actually think it's interesting. Some of what we were talking about earlier with respect to grief and challenge relates to it. Because look, so Carol Dweck at Stanford, the professor who wrote the great book Mindset a number of years ago, who really brought this in her work and this notion of growth mindset into some of the mainstream. And now we talk about it a lot in business.
Yeah.
And basically, I mean, her premise was that, like, growth mindset is about believing we can work hard at something and get better at it, versus fixed mindset is this notion of like, well, I'm either good at that or not good at that. There's not much I can do. So it's a pretty basic concept.
Yeah.
The reality is, though, we all operate at times with a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And it's really a matter of how do we approach things. And one of the ways that I think growth mindset is most relevant and valuable, particularly for leaders, is we're constantly dealing with change, challenge, disappointment, difficulty, right? I mean, I love the saying that like failure isn't the opposite of success. It's just part of success. So how do we deal with things when we fail, or when the team fails, or when it's not going well? One of the ways I also like to talk about this with the people that I work with, and using my own story and my own example from when my baseball career ended, a friend of mine said something to me. My friend Brian said something that I never forgot that was pretty simple but profound. He said, Mike, when you go through something difficult in life, like this was like 6 months after my baseball career ended, he was a little worried about me, took me out to lunch. He said, there's a tendency to ask this very simple but very dangerous question. The question is this: why did this happen to me? Or why is this happening to me? He said, we all do it. You're probably doing it right now. I'd be doing it if I were you, because it seems like you got a raw deal, man. He said, but the challenge with that is if you keep asking that question, it'll just lead you down a really negative path. It's just some reason, some justification, some rationalization for why you got a raw deal, why it's not fair, why you're a victim. He said, change one word in that question. It'll fundamentally change the way you're relating to this challenge and any challenge you've ever faced. It's change the word to the word for, and ask yourself, why did this happen for me? He said, it doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean like we just sprinkle fairy dust on it and it makes it good. No, this thing is hard, painful, challenging. He said, but if you challenge yourself to look at what are you learning from this? How's this going to make you stronger, better, more resilient? I don't know what you'll come up with, but it's going to make you better and stronger in the process. And when he first said it, my honest reaction, Dov, was like, he doesn't get it. He doesn't know what I'm going through. Because I was still pretty deep in my own grief, right? But the more I thought about it, I mean, look, then I realized, wait a minute, this guy cares about me. He's not trying to mess with me. The more I thought about that over the years, that question is part of what helped me get through that experience. And now whenever I face anything difficult or challenging, I deal with my own emotions about it. Sometimes I feel sad, angry, upset, like I let myself feel whatever I'm feeling. However, when I can get to that place, and this is for all of us, growth mindset is about literally looking at everything that comes our way, the good stuff, but also especially the hard and challenging stuff, as an opportunity to learn and grow. It's not being so only obsessed with the outcome. It's paying attention to the process. And again, we all kind of know this, but I think the difference is leaders and people that operate with a growth mindset are willing to lean into the discomfort of not only a challenge, but of something new, trusting, you know what? I don't know if I'm going to be any good at this, or I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I trust my own ability to figure it out. And at the very worst, even if I fall flat on my face and this is terrible, I will learn something. And most likely, not only will I learn something, but I'll be able to figure this out and actually have some level of success at it.
So really, I'm trying to make it easy for our listeners and viewers.
Yes.
From your point of view, the growth mindset is really at the simplest possible level, understanding that whatever this is, meaning it could be wonderful, it could suck the large potato,
Right.
but it is the willingness to embrace it from the place of it is showing up for my growth.
Yeah.
That's it, really.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I think that a lot of times people think, well, I've got a growth mindset. I listen to 2 audiobooks a week, and I go, and I've been on webinars, and I'm like, yeah, that's not really a growth mindset.
No.
And they go, well, what do you mean? I go, that's an educated mindset. That's a willingness to learn as a mindset. Very good. Not knocking them down, not saying it's bad. But the growth mindset is to be willing to grow through the discomfort.
Yes, absolutely. It's the willingness. Someone said years ago, there's that saying, an attitude of gratitude. And what I heard somebody say that I thought was so important, because gratitude and appreciation has always been a big part of my life and my work. But they said an attitude of gratitude is better than not having an attitude of gratitude. But gratitude is really a practice. If you practice gratitude, it'll have an impact. I think the same thing is true. You can have an idea of a growth mindset. Yes. So again, like you said, education, I listen to podcasts, I do this, I read books, but the practice of it is putting yourself in those uncomfortable situations where I'm going to be forced to grow because this is new and different and uncomfortable, which, by the way, is how we always grow. We come up to the edge, wherever the edge is, and then we step our toes over the edge a little bit, and it's uncomfortable, but then we grow. So yes. Again, the concept is one thing, and it's a good concept. The practice is where it really happens.
Yeah, it's so rare for people to actually get that. I mean, like, and again, I want to put it forward because it's one of the things that I hear a lot is that people will talk a lot about, fail forward. Yes. That's a very common thing. It's like everybody's saying this now. It's the new cool thing to say.
Right.
And I wrote a post about it recently. And I said, failing sucks.
Yep.
So if somebody wants to tell you, failing's all right, it's not. It sucks. Yeah. It absolutely sucks. And if once you recognize that it sucks, that's okay. Yeah. So the rhetoric is to embrace it, but the truth is it sucks. We all know that it sucks, but we're all inspired when we learn and we grow. However, as humans, we learn best through experience. Yes. And most of our experience comes from failing.
True. Well, and part of it, I was talking to a leader a little while back, and she's a pretty senior leader at Genentech, and she was sharing this thing with me about how she'd been really focused on growth mindset with her team and development plans and what are they working on and what are they challenging themselves to do. And she said, finally, one of the things she realized, and it wasn't that it was going badly, but there was something that seemed to be missing. And she realized part of what was missing is that she wasn't sharing her own growth plan with her team, that she was coaching them on what, and supporting them at realizing, oh, I would talk about that with my own manager or with a coach that I have outside of, but I wasn't actually sharing it. And she goes, and then I turned it around and said, I'm going to let my team know, these people who I'm asking them to share with me, what are you working on? What are you challenged by? Where's your growth edges and all this, that I'd share that with them. And she said, and she used an example of one of the things that she was interested in at the time was wanting to be on a board. And she's like, there's not a lot of women on boards and there's a challenge with it. And I'd been struggling and I'd been reaching out and trying to network and I'd been getting no's and it was frustrating. But I actually put that out and told my team, even though it seemed a little strange to share that with them because it was kind of a personal ambition goal, but they got really excited and supported me and gave me some feedback and some suggestions. And then when I ultimately was able to make that happen, I found that part of it came because my team pushed me and they also got to celebrate in that accomplishment. But it was just the idea that sometimes as leaders, what we forget is, yes, there's boundaries and we got to be mindful of the role that we play, but sometimes sharing some of our own growth journey, even with the people who report up to us, makes a big difference in terms of, their awareness of who we are, but also creating that in the environment that this is how we operate. We're all in this together, which is the title of the book I'm working on right now, by the way, but also becomes this metaphor, if you will, or concept for how you really create a strong team is that, yeah, some people have different roles than others for different reasons, and we can respect that. But as human beings, we're all just figuring this thing out as best we can.
I couldn't agree more. And in that sense of growth, I think it's really important. It's one of the reasons I like to talk about this in the show is in today's social media world, it's very easy to look out at people and, standing by the Lambo, with the very attractive individual next to them and
right.
it all happened immediately or instantly.
Right.
And what you don't realize is that the car and the person are rented.
Yes.
And it's not really a true image of people.
Right.
And that growth is the willingness to confront the difficult, and that nobody actually gets there overnight. And actually, those of us who are actually committed to a growth mindset know that there is no there. So
right.
What is one thing that, I like people to understand this, because you're very successful, you're very recognized, you've had many books, you've got another one you're working on right now. What is one thing that you did for a long time that actually blocked you from this level of success that you're at now or even aspire to?
That's a great question. I think I've probably wasted too much time. I've gotten much better at this, although it still will pop up to your point, wasted time comparing myself to other people and thinking, oh, well, Dov's got it figured out. Oh, well, so-and-so, I see that. Well, yeah. And just thinking like they have something special that I don't have, or making up stories in my mind. Oh, well, they came from a wealthy family or whatever that, just figuring out. It's just that, like that, I love that saying, like we compare our insides to other people's outsides and they don't match up. And so I would say early on in my career, I did this as an athlete. I did this early on in my career. I still catch myself doing it now, although I've gotten better, I have more awareness, but wasting a lot of time and energy, assuming other people have something that I don't have and thinking that they're better than me. And then by definition, then thinking I'm less than, and sort of in this weird, mental loop that just doesn't serve me or anybody else.
Yeah. I think it's a great insight, Mike, because so much, again, the social media world just has us, it feeds on us comparing ourselves to others.
Yeah.
And as I've often said, you don't live on Facebook, or even on social media, meaning there is an image on Facebook. My wife and I went to a wedding this weekend. I posted a picture of us together. Mm-hmm. We're all dressed up. My wife looks lovely. I look lovely. Mm-hmm. That's not how I look the next morning.
No.
At 6 a.m. when I woke up, my hair,
right.
my eyes are all,
yeah.
Dov looks so good. No, Dov looks so good because he made an effort to look good.
Right.
Dov at 5 a.m. 6 a.m. when he wakes up, a little bit, Leon, not quite so much.
Right.
And I think that that's just a metaphor of how our lives are.
Yes.
Life is messy. It's not a single image on Instagram.
Right.
It's not a single image anywhere. And I think
Right.
it's really important. That's the growth mindset, is this willingness to confront the uncomfortable.
Right.
Like
And
this,
also, yeah,
um,
I was saying, and also the remembering that as we've been talking about in different ways, things are complex. There's more than one emotion happening at the same time. Even back to this notion of authenticity and bringing our whole selves to work. Part of why I think that's so important is for people to realize that, like, even incredibly successful people fail miserably, have insecurities, aren't sure. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know about you, Dov, but sometimes I get off stage from speaking and people will say nice things and I appreciate it, but they'll say something. The one that I always laugh at is, it's so amazing that you don't get nervous when you do that. And I look at them like, what are you, crazy? Like, of course I do. I'm a human being. Like, I was just on stage in front of lots of people. My heart was racing. My knees were shaking, not because I thought I was going to die, but because, like, that's an intense thing to do. And what I try to explain without sounding arrogant about it is, like, I've been doing this for a long time, so I don't let the natural fear that comes up stop me from doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm more committed to what I'm about to say and the passion that I have for it than I am to, like, freaking out with my body reacting to, right? But I think that it's important for us to all understand, because that comparing to others, it looks like, oh, he's got it together or she's got it together. And yes, in some ways we do, but we're also, again, as I've been saying a lot, we're all just doing our best to try to figure it out as we go. And that was a message, quite frankly, for me growing up. I didn't get that message or didn't understand that. So I looked at other people and thought, well, maybe I'm just weird. Maybe something's wrong with me, because, like, I feel all these different feelings inside and sometimes have all kinds of doubts and insecurities, and other people didn't look nearly as nervous as I felt. So I just, and especially as a young man and as a man where you're supposed to suck it up and be tough and never let them see you sweat, I just sort of kept all that stuff inside.
It's craziness. It is. We've all been there. It's so crazy.
Yes.
So, Mike, this has been great, and we're going to go into the lightning round, and then I'm going to ask you to share with our listeners and our viewers where they can find out more about you.
Sounds
Let's
good.
just jump into the lightning round.
Okay.
What's a guilty pleasure for Mike Robbins?
Oh gosh, a guilty pleasure. Oh, just like a YouTube binge where I'll just start watching videos and, like, not stop for 2 hours.
Good. I can definitely might recognize a little bit of myself in that one. What's something you learned recently that took you by surprise?
Something I learned recently that took me by surprise. I learned about some of the ways that my own arrogance will manifest itself. My daughters are very good feedback mechanisms for this, that I say things and I really think that I'm intending to be helpful. But as my girls like tell me, Dad, you don't know everything in the whole world. So it's just been a deeper awareness of.
Your daughters are a reality check. Excuse me?
Yes, exactly.
It's coming down.
Exactly.
Right now. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
In a parallel universe, what's your career?
Oh, in a parallel. I mean, it's back to sports. I actually would love to have played professional basketball. It's my favorite sport to watch. I played it growing up. I wasn't nearly as good at it as baseball, but I would love to have played basketball professionally. Really?
That is very interesting. Well, that's really cool. So, Mike, before we finish, I would love for you to share with our viewers and our listeners one piece of practical advice based on what we've been talking about here today that you'd really like them to go away and do so they can put it into action. What would that one thing be?
This is, like, so simple, but I think, Dov, this is profound with respect to authenticity, with respect to growth mindset. I'll just ask it in a question like, how many of you like helping other people? Most of us do, right?
Sure.
But how many of you love asking other people for help? Most of us don't.
Mm-hmm.
But what we got to remember is, if we have more courage to ask for help, not only will we get more help, we'll actually empower the people around us, because everyone loves to help. And most of us are too scared or too stubborn or too whatever to actually ask for it. So if we start asking for help, it's a huge unlock for us. We get a ton of help and advice and insight and support. And then we empower the people around us. And for many of you watching and listening, you're leaders. So if you model that behavior, everyone around you will model it. It becomes safer. And then everyone starts helping each other, and it makes the team better.
That is a solid piece of very practical advice. Really is. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mike, before we go, I'd love for you to share with our listeners and our viewers where they can find out more about you and all the wonderful resources that you have.
Well, thank you. The best place to do that is our website, which is just mike-robbins.com. It's MIKE-ROBBINS.com.
Yeah. So Mike, then there's a dash, then Robbins, which is double B.
Yeah.
Okay. So MikeRobbins.com Make
Yeah.
sure you go there, mike-robbins.com. This was great, Mike. Thank you so much for all that you shared today. I really had a great time. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too. And it was really great. And for you, dear listener, remember, you can hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any past episodes in our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just get over there and chat about it. Tell us what you're going to do with this, because information is worth the hole in the donut. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Barron, as a speaker or strategist for your organization, go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. The research consistently shows that even the fastest growing companies face the challenges of spending way too much money, energy, time, and effort attracting, training, and developing top talent, but they also have them leave at an alarming rate. If you are frustrated with investing in the training and development of your talent, only have them leave before you have your ROI, and come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. You can also stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a triple W, just Matrix like the movie, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197 and it's absolutely free to you for tuning in today. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends, stay curious about this wonderful mixture of so many feelings and so many things that are going on in everybody's life that makes them authentic. I want to challenge you to stay curious about the depth of a human being is always more than what's simply on the surface. If you stay curious, you'll find out more about them. And the only way to do that is to be really authentic about who you are. And that means to stay committed to your growth in any circumstance. I'm Dov Barron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.